Hey everybody, John Fenn here, Church Without Walls International, CWOWI.org. And if you're in the EU, you might want to visit our EU website, CWOWI.eu. You'll find my weekly thoughts translated into about a dozen different languages there. May be helpful to you. But our main site is cwowi.org. Sign up for my weekly thoughts, which is that weekly email that comes out, and my newsletter, and that's where we put prophetic things and announce Zoom meetings, conferences, things of that nature. All right, today I want to get right into talking about the prayer of agreement and the statement that Jesus said, where two or three are gathered together in my name, I'm there in the midst of them. And of course, that's part of our tradition that, hey, it only takes two and the Lord's right there in the midst. And we take that metaphorically or we take it spiritually that, okay, let's get together in prayer, let's agree on something. But let me set it in the right context so you'll have the right foundation to build upon. Because a lot of people a lot of people think that what they believe is scriptural, but it's not necessarily the case. So we're in Matthew chapter 18, verses 11 through 20. Now, in verses 11 through 14, Jesus asks, which of you who has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray into the wilderness, won't you go and search for that one sheep that has gone astray into the wilderness? And so that's the parable of the lost sheep. Okay, 100 sheep, one of them goes astray into the wilderness, and the shepherd goes after him. And when he finds him, he's going to rejoice more over that one than the 99 who stayed in the flock. So Jesus starts this parable or starts this teaching with that understanding. And then in verse 15, he says, moreover, or in other translations, he says, I say unto you again, or in like manner. In other words, Jesus is linking the parable of the lost sheep to what he's about to teach. So in Matthew 18, verses 11 through 14, he's talking about having 100 sheep. One of them goes astray. The shepherd goes into the wilderness to find that sheep that's in his wilderness and bring him back to the flock. So in verse 15, Jesus continues the parable. He's continuing the teaching by saying, moreover, or again I say to you, it's like a parent saying, to their child, you clean up your room. Moreover, if you don't clean up your room, you're not going to the ball game on Friday night. It's a continuation of the thought. So he says in verse 15, he says, if your brother has sinned against you, in other words, if they've trespassed against you, go to him privately, you and he alone, and be reconciled. But if he won't be reconciled, then take one or two others. So you've got the original guy, then you've got one or two others, a total of two or three who are witnesses to the offense, and go to him and be reconciled. So this helps us understand what caused that one sheep to go astray. It was some sin against a brother. It was some trespass that he committed against a brother, or he felt he had been trespassed against. Because Jesus says, moreover, if your brother sin against you. So we can apply this in a couple different ways, but you get the idea there that you go and you seek reconciliation. If he won't hear you, then you take one or two witnesses with you who are aware of what's going on. He says if he doesn't listen to them, take it to the leadership of the church. Now understand, the church is a new concept in that time. They didn't really know what it was because they are on that side of the cross. But the church began meeting in homes as a continuation of the synagogue system. And the synagogues met in homes, families, where they had to have a minimum of 10 adult males. And adult males were registered as boys 13 and up. So if you had two or three families with handful of boys, 13 and up, then they had a synagogue. And so after the day of Pentecost, they just continued in that system, meeting in homes centered around families. So when Jesus says, tell it to the church, he's talking about in the home, tell the core group of leaders, the key families, the key individuals. And Jesus said, in that case, then treat him like a publican and a sinner, or a tax collector and a sinner. Now, right there, many pastors have taken it and said, okay, you shunned them, you ignore them. But that doesn't line up with what Jesus said. Because previously, in Matthew chapter 5, you go through about verse 33 through 48 there. Jesus said, you've heard that it's been said, you love your neighbors, but you hate your enemies. And he said, but I say to you, do good to those that hate you, pray for them and bless them. And he said, you've got to be, he closed out Matthew chapter 5 saying, you've got to be like your Father who causes the sun to shine on the just and the unjust and the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. You need to be perfect, that is, mature, complete, just like your Father. So when Jesus later says, treat them like a heathen and a publican, he's talking about loving them. He's not talking about shunning them. He's not talking about ignoring them. He's not talking about have nothing to do with them. It has to be consistent with what Jesus had just said in Matthew chapter 5, which was to love them, bless them, do good to them. In other words, you treat them like they're not saved. You love on them and show goodness and mercy to them. And Jesus goes on to say then that after you've treated them like a heathen and publican, he said, whatever you, it's interesting in the Greek, whatever you bind or, let me put it this way. He says, where two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst. What led up to that? And who are these two or more? They are the one or two others, plus the original man, who went to go be reconciled with that sheep that went astray. Jesus said, it's in the Greek, he says, whatsoever you bind on earth shall have already been bound in heaven. And whatsoever you loose on earth shall have already been loosed from heaven. This shows us that these men who went first one-on-one with the brother who has sinned, that sheep that's gone off into the wilderness, and then the one or two others, these men so love that man. The guy went individually first, then he brought one or two witnesses with him, and he wouldn't hear him, and so he took it to the leadership, the core group of the families of the church, to pray for him, and they treat him like they're unsaved. They treat him, they love on him, they do good for them. It's an open door. They let them know it's an open door to reconciliation. And so when Jesus says, whatever you bind or loose has already been bound or loosed from heaven, it tells us we are cooperating with heaven. We are cooperating with the Good Shepherd who is overseeing all this, who sees that one sheep going astray aside from the flock. And we are cooperating with heaven. And the bind or loose is a legal term that has to do with giving permission or not giving permission. And so what they're doing is taking authority over the devil, and it's not in the binding because Jesus said to rebuke them, but it's to let heaven know, hey, the door is open. We pray for our brother. He's loosed from his trespass. We let loose of his trespass. You're cooperating with heaven, who is already bound or loosed, whatever it is that you're talking about on behalf of this brother. And so it is in that context that Jesus says, if two of you agree on anything you ask, it will be done. For where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst. What you're asking for in this context is for that lost sheep to be brought back to the flock. The reason Jesus is in the midst of their meeting, those one or two or three, those two or three, the reason Jesus is in the midst is because he is the Good Shepherd. And now he is being licensed, he is being loosed from heaven to go after that one sheep who's in the wilderness, to bring him back to the flock, to bring him back to reconciliation. You see the progression where one man tried and the man wouldn't be reconciled. He brought one or two others, he wouldn't be reconciled. He told it to the families in the church, he wouldn't be reconciled. Now it's time for the Good Shepherd to go after that sheep in the wilderness. So maybe you have a loved one, maybe you have a friend who, because of offense, or they've gotten off onto some strange doctrine or something, and they have separated themselves from those that know and love them in the faith. You gather together and you say, Jesus, we have done everything we know to do. I've gone individually. I've gone with one or two witnesses. We have told the leadership of the church and we pray for them and everything else. And now, Lord, the Good Shepherd, we are loosing you. We are cooperating with heaven. And now I can see that the Father, you are loosing the Good Shepherd to go into the wilderness to find our friend, to bring him back to you. That's why Jesus is in the midst of their gathering together. And that's what they are asking for. Anything they ask, it will be done. The shepherd is there. They are cooperating with heaven. They're cooperating with the shepherd. And they're saying, go find our friend because we've done everything we can do. And nothing has happened. He's not changed. So please, Good Shepherd, go into the wilderness and restore our friend and bring him back to us. That's why Jesus is in the midst. That's why they are praying the prayer of agreement. They're agreeing on behalf of their friend. So that is the foundation. I hope it's been a blessing. Take it from there. Maybe this is an aha moment But let it be a blessing to you. Study it out and see what I said. It's true. God bless.